Hey, it's Jeff. Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be showing you how to water and prune a jade plant with results. This one's been pruned about 3 weeks ago, so I'll show you where I made the cuts and all the new little stems and buds popping through. Pruning is not only good for getting the plant to branch out, but it also helps thicken up the main trunk or stem. So I'll talk all about that kind of stuff, so let's get into it. I'll talk about pruning first, and it can be extremely terrifying the first time you prune a jade plant. I know I was terrified that I was going to kill my jade plant after I snipped off some branches from the mother plant way back there, but this one's been pruned probably like 50 times. And I prune not only to shape the plant, to manipulate it into grow a certain way, to get a thick, beefy stem, but also to propagate cuttings, which I've given to friends and that sort of thing. Sometimes jade plants can get overgrown pretty quickly. The weight of the branches or the weight of the leaves can pull the branches down, causing it to, I guess, snap in certain areas. So I guess that's another reason why you'd want to propagate. When this plant was a small cutting, I don't think I started pruning it until it was about maybe almost 2 years old. So about 1.5 years, it started to branch out naturally on its own. And then I continued to, I guess, get that branching process by pruning over the last number of years here. And it's turned into an absolutely gorgeous plant. In other videos, I talked about how you can manipulate the branching process. You can see up here, there are 2 leaves which are opposite each other on each node. And as you go up to the next node, the leaves are, again, there's 2 per node, but it's in the opposite direction from the one below it. So when I want a branch a certain way, the branches will always form on the same sides of the leaves, just, I guess, below it. And an example of that is right here. I made a prune just above these 2 leaves. You can see just 2 small little new stems. They almost look like leaves, but they'll pop out as new stems, and I'll show you. See if I can find another area up here where it's branched out previously. Up here you can see I've made a prune previously. It's got 2 branches, and now it's got a number of nodes with leaves on it. I'll show you a few more examples with here as well. Again, you can see the new stems popping out from the same sides of the leaves. Here's just a couple little buds popping through there. This one is a little bit more further along. Again, they're all on the same sides of the leaves. So if you have an area where you want to fill out, like if there's a bare spot and you want the branches to be this way, then just find those 2 leaves, make a cut just above it, and you can get it to grow in a certain way. I think these new jade leaves are just the cutest little things. They just look like little animal ears or something like that. So yeah, everywhere where I've made the prunes or the cuts, it's getting new growth. These ones here just look like little hands popping through the stem there, little fingers. And here's the 2 cutest little leaves just up top there. So yeah, pruning a jade is really healthy. It stimulates growth, and it gets these nice new glossy shiny leaves down here as well. You can see everywhere where I've made the cut, they're getting new growth. So this has taken, like I said, about 3 weeks, so that's kind of what to expect. Between that 2 weeks to a month, depending on the amount of light that you give it. Mine are sitting in a south-facing window. They've been there for a number of years, and they're doing really good. So that's kind of what to expect. So look at that, it just looks like 2 little hands popping through the top here. I'm going to show on this branch right here. Actually, I'm just going to take this leaf right off. You can just pluck that off. You can propagate that in soil. I'll just set that aside, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. Anytime I have a branch that is starting to grow downwards, I will always cut it off because I want all of my branches to grow upright like a tree. This one's starting to grow laterally, and eventually with the weight of the new leaves, it's going to grow downwards, which I don't want. So I'm going to show you how to make the cut. So I like to get as close to the stem as possible, just taking my pruning shears, and without actually cutting or damaging the stem, just cut it off like that. This will callus over and fall off. It'll basically be just a little dry disc, and you can see that's what happened right here as well. There was a previous branch that I cut off, and it leaves kind of like a little scar like that. Yeah, it's nothing too drastic, I guess. Here's another one back there as well. But eventually it'll just leave a nice clean portion of the stem. This is another branch that eventually I'll probably have to prune off at some point as it's going to be dragging down. Okay, so this plant actually came from a cutting maybe a little bit larger than this. And this is what it's turned into in the last 5 years with lots of sun, proper soil, proper pot, all that kind of stuff, which I'll talk about here in a second. I just want to show this jade plant right here. This is a plant that I'm growing for my son. Whenever he moves out or something like that, he'll have a nice little gift, I guess, from me over the years. So again, this plant came from a cutting maybe slightly larger than this one, and I did do kind of a hard prune the other day, or I guess 3 weeks ago when I did this one. I cut off a woody portion of the stem, and you can see it's now getting 2 little stems popping out. I find that if you cut a woody portion of the stem, the new growth takes a little bit longer than if it came from kind of like the green, fleshy, soft portion of the stem. But just to show you, it will grow if you cut a woody portion of the stem. Here is kind of a sad looking cutting. This is the cutting that came off of this stem. And the reason why I cut it off is I wanted this area to fill out a little bit more than it was. It was actually starting to lean quite heavily on this side, so it looked kind of funny. It had kind of a bigger branch out this way, but the center of the plant was really bare, so I decided to cut it back quite drastically, and I'm just trying to fill in this area a little bit, I guess, thicker and not so much dangling off the side. This cutting will be going to a good friend of mine, so when you take a jade stem cutting, I like to cut off the lower leaves, and then you literally just stick it in a container of soil. Now, with this one, I didn't water it for the first 2 weeks. I actually went camping. We went on holidays for a week, and I completely forgot about this one, even when I got home, because it was tucked behind this jade plant on my south-facing window ledge. And when I noticed it, the leaves, they were really wrinkly. So you can see they're still wrinkly. So I did give it a good thorough soaking, and just so you can see, if you want to know if it's rooted or not, just slightly pull up on the soil or on the stem, and if it does not budge, then it is rooted. You don't need to take it out or anything like that, but it's definitely going to be needing another watering because the soil is bone dry and the weight of the pot is really light, and obviously you can see that the leaves are pretty dehydrated. So I'm going to give this one some water here, which I'll do shortly, but that's typically what I do when I put my fresh cuttings. You can let them callus over. I typically don't. Just stick them in a pot of soil. Don't touch it. Give it lots of light. I won't even, don't touch it. I mean, don't water it for probably about the first week or so, because if you water the soil, there's no roots to suck up that moisture in the soil. So all you're going to do is potentially give it root rot. So jade plants are really good at rooting themselves because they store a lot of nutrients and water in their thick leaves. So really you don't have to do anything for about the first week or two. You could literally set this on a counter or on the table and it'll start to root by itself when it's not even in soil or anything like that. So that's the, I guess, nice thing about jade plants. They're super easy to propagate. You don't have to basically touch them for about the first week or two, and then give it a light watering. I'm going to give this one a heavy watering as I've completely neglected it. And you can see, even though I haven't watered or anything, it's still getting new growth. So again, this plant should have been dead. I didn't water it or anything like that, but it's pushing out new growth. It rooted all by itself. So don't be scared. Set it aside, leave it alone, let it do its thing, and maybe give it water in, like, I'd say 10 days, and it should be good. Now for watering jade plants, I use a little trick with the leaves here, which I'll talk about in a second, but you want to make sure that you are using a well-draining soil. So I only use a cactus succulent mix, as it's really well draining. It has lots of perlite, sometimes it has some sand content in there. It's formulated for succulents and cactus that don't like to sit in soggy soil for very long. Do not use a regular potting mix or soil, as it's pretty heavy with peat moss. Peat moss typically hangs on to or retains moisture, which is exactly what you don't want. Jade plant roots, they're very thin, they're very fragile, they don't tolerate soggy soil for very long. One of the misconceptions is that jade plants don't like a lot of water, and that's not entirely true. They just don't like to sit in soggy soil. I will completely saturate or completely soak the soil, maybe even a few times, just letting it come out the bottom of the drain hole. And also the type of pot can determine how much water your jade plant receives. So this is a porcelain pot. It's not like terracotta, which I use and recommend for almost all succulents and cactus. Terracotta, it's very porous, it's very absorbent, so it is good at soaking up moisture levels or moisture lower in the pot and then evaporating it out. Okay, so now the little trick that I like to use is I will fold or try and bend the leaves. This one I watered yesterday, so you can see I cannot easily fold or bend the leaf. It's very plump, it's very thick, and it looks really good. This one over here in my terracotta pot, you can see I can slightly bend the leaves. So you should not be able to do that if it is well watered. And I can fold it like this. It's not wrinkly or dehydrated like this one. This one is, it's too far, I guess, in the underwatering side of it. So you don't want to let it get to this point. This is the perfect stage where you can give it some water. Again, checking the soil, the weight of the pot, if it's pretty light. Check the leaves, give them a little bit of a squeeze, and that will determine whether the plant needs to be watered or not. So this one definitely needs to be watered. I can squeeze it a little bit. This one I'll probably water in another week or two, as again, just paying attention to the leaves. I'm going to be adding some fertilizer to the water today. Previously, I used to use just a balanced 20-20-20 fertilizer, Miracle-Gro's granular. I'd put it in a container of water, mix it up. I would actually cut the dosage in half, so it would be more of like a 10-10-10 for the NPK value. I've been using this cactus plant food. I've just been trialing it. It's got an NPK value of 277, and I found that it's not growing as fast as it should be if you fertilize it. So I'm actually going to be switching to a higher nitrogen fertilizer again, which is a 936. I'm using Foliage Pro for most of my houseplants, and they absolutely love it. So follow the directions on whichever fertilizer that you use. I'm not an expert with any of this, but I am going to be using a higher nitrogen. Nitrogen for houseplants promotes healthier green leaves and stems. It's used in, I guess, photosynthesis. Normally when I water my houseplants and the soil is really dry, I'll just use straight water first, just to kind of saturate that soil, and it's going to drain through really fast. And I just don't want to basically waste all of the fertilizer before the soil is, I guess, hydrated. Now I'm just going to continue to give it some water. There's fertilizer in this mixture now. Just going to let it come out the bottom. Let that soak through. You should, if it's in this like wrinkly stage or wrinkly phase, I would give it at least 3 to 5, maybe even 7 days before you start to see it plumping back up. Again, paying attention to the soil, to the leaves. It might need another soaking in like a week's time. So just again, pay attention to the soil, make sure it's dry. This plant will probably use this moisture up fairly fast. I think I watered it maybe a week ago. The leaves still look like this. They're still pretty wrinkly, but the soil was really dry. So the roots might be soaking all that moisture up just to, I guess, maintain or sustain the new growth popping through the top, and not really replenishing the moisture that has been depleted from the leaves. So I've given it a good soaking. I'm going to give it another one, making sure that that soil is completely saturated. So I'm just going to dump kind of a large portion on the top here, let that kind of soak through. Sometimes you'll see the water kind of bubbling. That's just little air pockets in the dry soil. Just keep giving it water until it flows out the bottom of the drain hole. I just want to show this right here. I'm just going to rinse this off, this little leaf. I don't even remember when I put this leaf in. I just put it on the soil, and you can see it's getting the tiniest little roots. So I just literally threw it on top of the soil, and it's sprouting a little root on its own. So I just throw it on like that. I don't bury it, and it only gets moisture whenever I water the plant. And here are 2 examples of previous leaf propagations that I've just literally left it on top of the soil. They've sprouted into their own new little plants. Here's another example right here. So I just lay the leaves right on top of the soil. I don't do anything for it, and it roots itself. It's got a nice little root poking through. Actually looks like a couple. And then the new growth will pop out just above those roots there, and it'll eventually start to push out its own new stem with leaves, and eventually this leaf will shrivel and dry up. If it gets to that point, I just cut it off. But if it's green and plump like this, then I just leave it alone. I found that if you leave this on the plant tends to grow much faster than if you cut it off, which I've done before. It basically stunts the growth, I found, with the one time that I did cut it off. So leave the leaf on until it basically dries up and falls off on its own. Okay, nothing's coming out the bottom yet, so I've almost used this entire can. Just let that flow through and I'll fill it up here again, and I will water it as many times as it takes for it to come out the bottom of the drain hole. I think this watering can is a 1 liter watering can, so it's already taken 1 liter. Let's see if this one does it. I can see it's coming out the bottom of the drain hole now, so I'm just going to let this continue to soak through, but I think that's all the water I'm going to give it. I'm going to put it back in its sunny location in the south-facing window, let it use that beautiful sunshine to photosynthesize and continue with all this new growth. So I think that's going to be pretty much it for this video. If you have any comments or questions, please leave it down below in the comment section. Thanks again for watching, everyone. Take care. Bye.